Hi, and welcome to Coping During the COVID Crisis. I'm Janet Gross. Most of us have spent the past year waiting for this phase of the pandemic, the phase where we can almost see the end, or the beginning of the end, hopefully. Reunions with friends and relatives, no masks, handshakes, hugs, the things we've missed so much. And so it might seem kind of strange to also feel anxiousness and even stress over how that's going to happen. Dr. Roy Salgado, professor of counseling at the University of Holy Cross, is here to talk about that, how to deal with those mixed feelings during the transition out of this pandemic. It does seem strange, huh, that we get that mix.
It is. You know, we've been gung-ho all this time, all these months to get there, and now we're gun-shy. We're just not sure how to proceed. It's like we've forgotten certain social mores and ways of interacting with those outside of our household. And we're anxious, and it's okay. And it's important for us to realize that it is like a first day of school again. You know, like you've been out for the summer, and you're going back to that first day of school. We've been out for a year, if you will, in many situations. And now coming back to a new way of interacting with the general population, it's anxiety producing. And so conversations are being had within households as to how to proceed.
Right, because for over a year, we've avoid social contact. You know, you on the phone or Zoom or whatever, but that whole chit-chat kind of thing that happens in the grocery store or whatever, you know.
You know, and not that we want to go there necessarily, but we would be remiss if we didn't discuss, to a certain extent, the fact that the politics of it all has come into play. You know, that there's a political aspect to COVID-19 that unfortunately has evolved amidst all of this. And so you have this one question in particular that makes it a little awkward for people. They don't know whether to ask it or not, or if they do, what the reaction would be is, have you gotten vaccinated?
Yes.
That question is kind of a loaded question. And so do I ask it? Do I not ask it? And I want to ask it because I want to know how to interact with those around me depending on their answer. And if they answer a certain way, how do I respond? And then people picking up on those cues, on the looks, on the pause, on the way you proceed. All of these things are adding to that social anxiety as to what to do, how to do it, with whom, where, under what circumstances.
So, and sometimes there's judgment.
Right.
A little attitude that comes with the answer or the question.
Right, with the answer or the question. And so the important thing is to be mindful of that and be respectful when we interact with other people, and to pay attention to our own facial expressions, to our corporal language, how we interact with other people, because it is starting to play a factor as people are starting to come into one another and having conversations about life, and as people go back into certain workspaces too, as the service industry opens up, as offices start to open up, as schools and universities go back, you name it, the list goes on and on and on, interacting with people that you haven't interacted with in a face-to-face situation in a year, people are going to come into it with different ideas. People are going to come into it with having had different experiences and being respectful of that and not minimizing the other's perspective or the other's approach to how we engage with one another once again.
There has to be compassion with that too.
Yes.
Just understanding, okay, I get it. Maybe you're in a different situation than I am.
And being mindful of that.
Yeah.
That people are in different situations, and so people make different decisions for themselves based on that, and that not everything is to be painted with a broad brush.
Right. There's the other thing that happens when you first meet somebody. Do we hug? Are you? Can we shake hands?
Yeah.
And that's going to happen certainly in business. For a while, that question is going to be right there, unless the other person is obvious about it.
Right. Right. And then you can tell too. You can tell if a person is maintaining their distance, and it's like, or they even ask the question, "Are you hugging? Are you shaking? Is it okay?" And then that person either feels compelled to say, "Yeah, I'm okay," or not so much. So we're easing into that.
Yeah.
And it's an awkward way to start an interaction.
Right. Because, who's going to be the person I don't hug?
Right.
The non-huggers are really familiar with saying that.
Right. And in southeastern Louisiana, typically prior to the pandemic, this is a hugging community.
Yeah, we are.
And so, a hugging community that has adapted to not hugging, coming back, and then some perhaps deciding, you know what? I'm no longer a hugger. I'm no longer a handshaker. I'm no longer someone who's going to be greeting people in a certain way. Being okay with that. It's okay.
So are we kind of building up that kind of social anxiety inside of ourselves, or have we built that up over the time? Because, I know that there's kind of a little bit, am I ready for this? Am I good anymore?
Right.
Are people going to think I'm smart? All the things that,
Right.
am I a good conversationalist? All those things.
Yeah, and giving yourself permission to be okay with not being adequate or perfect or proficient in any given area. It's okay. You're not alone. This is pretty universal.
Yeah.
People all over the place are struggling with reintegrating into society in this post-COVID, post-vaccination, reopening phase of life. Southeastern Louisiana is going through it right now. Other parts of the world have started to ease into it in other ways. Other parts of the world are still in major lockdown, and at some point they'll be opening up as well. But right now, this is where we are in our area. Mm-hmm. And give ourselves permission to be a little gun shy. If we are feeling too anxious about it, then don't rush into it. Just because things are opening up doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be among the first to do so. You can still make a decision for yourself to maintain, being at home and minding those guidelines that the CDC has in place, and make a decision for yourself. And then when you're ready, you go back into the type of daily living that perhaps others have begun to incorporate with regard to socializing in work, school, and life.
So this doesn't have to be a let's jump in the pool kind of moment.
Yeah, nobody's dragging you out of your home to go and interact, right? So if you're not comfortable, then give yourself the grace and the compassion to kind of just be home, and then you come out when you're ready.
And you don't really have to accept every single social invitation that is now popping up, which might seem like a great idea, and you really have been longing for it, but maybe not, all the time, every one.
Right, and it's okay to say no. It's okay to say, you know what, I'm not going to go to that barbecue. I'm not going to go to that crawfish boil. It's okay. People get it. Yeah. I think people understand more than we think. We don't want to be, the party pooper or the oddball out with regard to social situations. You're not. We're not. For those that are wanting to socialize and engage in life as it once had been, they're not the bad guy. The person who is wanting to be a little more cautious and stay home, they're not the bad guy. People are going to do what is in their best interest, and so whatever that may be. For some people, being out there and socializing might actually be in their best interest. For some people, staying back and waiting to see what happens might be in their best interest. Every case is different, every situation is different, and we are to proceed as such.
Okay, and a lot of people, if they need help talking this through, or thinking about it, because maybe it is oppressive for some people, or a really anxiety building. The University of Holy Cross is still.
Yes,
tell us
we
about.
continue to provide this service through the pandemic, and we're continuing to provide it for several more months to come. And all you have to do is call the number at the bottom of the screen, and the administrative assistant for the Thomas C. Chambers Counseling and Training Center will take that call and will triage it to the clinical director, who will then assign it to a counselor in training, who will then help you work through this and any other issue that might present itself.
And free.
And free of charge.
Yes.
That's the key.
Okay. All right. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk more about transitioning to another new normal. Stay with us. And welcome back. As we talk about walking our way out of life of restrictions and in many cases fear because of the pandemic, we've asked Dr. Amanda Salgado, adjunct professor of counseling and behavioral science at the University of Holy Cross, to join us. Dr. Salgado, familiar name here. Perhaps Dr. Salgado, an introduction before we start?
Yes, we kind of know each other. Not only do we have the good fortune of working with one another at the University of Holy Cross, but she happens to be my lovely wife and mother of my son and daughter-to-be. So we're happy to have her on today's show.
Oh, well, we are so glad that we get to actually see you in person. We've here on set have heard about you, and we know you are great colleague, but a loving.
I love having her as a wife and a colleague. We
Yay.
consult all the time, and we process things to death as counselors and therapists. We think things through, we feel things, we talk about how we respond. It's great to be married to a counselor.
I don't even want to think about the conversations in your house, really, believe me. Okay, well, back to it. Dr. Salgado, how can we ease back into normal? And while it may seem strange, like we're talking about that we might have to prepare to do that, we actually might have to prepare to do that, right? To get back in.
Absolutely, and thank you for that lovely introduction. It's great to be here. We definitely are looking at a new time in this new world that we've experienced for the last year. As restrictions ease and as we start to go back to what was sort of normal life, it's sort of a new normal now. There is a lot of thinking and a lot of planning that we have to do as individuals and as families, as communities, as far as how to navigate this new space, because we got pretty good at the lockdown. We know the expectations for that, and we did what we needed to do. So this is sort of a new realm in this pandemic world, and it is going to take a lot of planning and just a lot of processing and talking amongst the people in your lives.
Right, because there might be people in the same household who, I'm ready to go, I'm not ready to go. So you've got to kind of negotiate all of that, right? I mean, to really think it through, but so you don't hurt other people's feelings.
Yes, we just thinking about people that we know and clients that we have, you have very different levels of comfort. Some people are raring to go and just want to jump back in full force, and people in their own households may be very reticent and just have a lot of concerns about what that's really going to look like and how one person's desire to jump in might affect their life and their desire to take things more slowly. So it's something that we really have to discuss, just have an open communication with your spouse, your children, people you work with, family members, and just show each other a lot of grace in that communication, just really hearing what everyone else has to say and what their level of comfort is.
So as we all work through this, there are sometimes issues that can't be resolved within a family.
Right.
And that's,
Yeah, and to that point, we have been asked for the past year to be mindful of our community at large, that we, as a public health measure, make an informed decision to shut down, stay in, wear our masks, wash our hands, keep 6 feet of social distance, and we've done so. And we've been told that we ought to do this as a matter of respect for the other, for our community, and for the general public and welfare. Now that we're easing into new restrictions, we ought to continue that respect for those within our household, because there may be different people with different perspectives within the same household. Some, as Dr. Salgado said, are ready to jump in. Others are a little more resistant. And so perhaps having those conversations so that you can come up with some solution that works for both, that it's not one person's perspective that dominates and makes the other one more anxious. Because what does it help if you come back to your home and there's strife, there's anxiety, there's uneasiness? We want people to be able to feel comfortable in whatever situation that they find themselves in.
And if you're going to talk this through and it's not working at the house and you want somebody else to talk to, a lot of people have during this pandemic turned to the University of Holy Cross and the service that we mentioned earlier with the free counseling. Dr. Salgado, how can counselors really help people work through this? What can they do?
Counselors have a really unique skill set that allows them to help pretty much anyone in any facet of life and any challenge, and really help them to navigate life and sort of journey with them to help them to flourish. That's always the word I like to use and think of, is how do I help my clients flourish? And so in a situation like this, giving them that space to be able to express what they're experiencing, normalizing it, talking about how this is this is a strange time. It continues to be a strange time, and just giving them that opportunity to be able to have a place to sort of process what they're experiencing in their own minds and families, and how to go forward, especially if you're in a household where your views do differ on how to go forward. And counselors can definitely help couples, families find a way to get on the same page as much as possible, so that everyone has a level of comfort, and that nobody's desires or comfort level is being dismissed.
You know, I was thinking about this. A lot of us do like to get approval for our behavior, and so we look to people we love to say, "Is this? Do you think this is right? What do you know?" And kind of. But we really, I don't know that that's smart, because if we're basing our lives on others' approval, that may not be the right way to go, or the right message it gives ourselves.
Right. Yeah. You know, we're independent, sovereign beings, and so that's something that needs to be balanced with the general welfare of others. You know, and so my rights are important, but so are your rights. My desires are important, but so are your desires. My expectations are important, but so are your expectations. My perspective, your perspective. And then balancing that out to come up with some reasonable medium. And so having those conversations, you know, among individuals within a household, among individuals out in society, and then coming to some sort of resolution that benefits most involved, I would say. I don't know that we can ever come up with something that benefits all, but something that benefits most. And so starting those conversations within the home, and what's reflected in the home in terms of good, honest conversations, if each household does that, will spread out into our communities, and then we will be respectful of others once we start to ease into society.
Dr. Salgado, I'm going to ask you to look into the future a bit. Do you think as a society, especially here in the U.S., do you think that we are it's going to be an easier road once we get back there? Do you think we'll fall right back into our lives, or is it going to have, you know, repercussions or waves for a while?
Yeah, great question. I think that we all would love for the future to just go back to normal, no more masks, you know, being able to stop in the grocery store and talk to a neighbor, talk to someone while picking or dropping your child off. And I think we'll get back to that to an extent, but I think that this is definitely going to have repercussions that linger for our society for probably generations. Our children are going to remember this to an extent, and how this affected their lives. And so I think there will always be, for those of us that have experienced this, it'll stay with us to an extent. And maybe, you know, as people, we can find a way to make it stick with us in a way that is positive and beneficial and not negative, not sort of having this constant cloud of the memory of COVID, but to find a way to acknowledge that, you know, we really are resilient, and, you know, we've come a long way, and that I think we've done a pretty good job as a city, as a community, as a country, and just sort of look for those positives in moving forward.
You know, and to that point, too, with regard to the future, you know, previous generations have experienced, on a global scale, significant situations, such as the Great Depression. And one of the things that we see from that generation, who is now in their 90s, perhaps, that they experienced it as children, or beyond, that they were children, the long-term effect of that was they became more conscious and conscientious of food and money. And so subsequent generations viewed as thrifty. But they were prudent with money and food in a way that's
everything
and saving things. Yeah. So we may find that this generation of children, as the long-term effects generations decades down the road, they're going to have a different impact with regard to how they interact with others, hygiene, things that disease, communicable diseases in general. They may respond to it as a generation in a way that previous generations had not.
More of an awareness of contagion, perhaps.
Of just about anything, whether it be the flu, the common cold, COVID, you name it.
Right. I like the word that Dr. Salgado used, resilience. we've got resilience here. So
Yes.
I like that.
Yes.
Dr. Salgado, Dr. Amanda Salgado, thank you for joining us. It was great to meet you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll be back in a minute. Stay with us.
I know what you're thinking. I need a job.
Well, I've been there.
I've been there.
But you gotta keep
You
going.
just need the right skills. Find an apprenticeship.
I found a course online.
You can do this.
You will find something.
We'll find something new.
We've been talking about how to handle the transition out of a COVID-centric world, and certainly one of the things we should do is take care of ourselves. We all have to determine our own pace, as we've been talking about, our direction, things like that, right?
Yes.
Just to really, slow, fast, whatever it's you.
You have to decide for yourself. We have to take in all the information. We have to pay attention to the CDC guidelines and recommendations. We have to pay attention to what our local officials are saying about what's happening in our given area, and then make a decision based on that information and our own particular lived experience and circumstance. What is right for me is not right for the next person. And so taking all of that into consideration to decide, how do I ease in as the restrictions are being eased? How do I ease back into society, whether that's school, work, activities, whatever that may be. And
Sure, because everybody's COVID experience was not the same.
And that's a very key point. Everybody's COVID experience was not the same. Some people experienced the loss of a loved one.
Right.
Some people got deathly ill themselves. Some people were on ventilators. Some people were hospitalized. Those individuals who experienced what we've been talking about all of this year, who actually lived it, that has been their lived experience of COVID, of death, of hospitalization, of health being impacted. They're going to be a lot more gun shy in terms of easing in, because they have a different experience. That's what they lived this past year, and they're still grieving. They're still grieving the loss of a loved one. They're still grieving their own health having been compromised, as opposed to others that perhaps their lived experience has been businesses being shut down, school being virtual, work being virtual, services being delivered to the home. That's a different COVID experience. Having lost someone is another. And so being aware that what one perhaps experienced in one situation for the past year is not what somebody else did. And so we have to be very respectful of that and take that into consideration as we all make the decision to ease back in. Some are not going to ease back in right now because they're not ready, and that's okay. Others will ease back into it because they feel that they're ready, and that's okay too. But we need not to discount or dismiss the other's perspective.
And we could all, we could really, if we don't watch our words, we could hurt people. Like, yay, this is over, it's back to normal, because those people are not.
Right.
And it may not be for a while.
Yes.
And then, you start with the questions about, oh, what happened? And then that brings everything back up. And then, just the way you approach, their loss or whatever, that could be hurtful. Or the people who still have symptoms.
Yeah. We need to be prudent in our conversations with people on a number of different fronts as we ease back in, because we don't necessarily know what people's experiences have been throughout this year.
Yeah.
And we're operating under assumptions and presumptions based on our experience. But the person down the street may have lost someone. The person down the street may have gotten sick themselves. And so we can't go in with the notion that their experience has been our experience, because it's not.
Right.
And so we need to be mindful of what we say and how we say it and how we integrate back into society as the restrictions ease.
Always careful with our words, and that's true, especially now, I think, right? Okay, some of the bad habits we kind of got into over COVID. Let's talk about that for a second, because
Sure.
There are a lot of them. We're not going to talk about them all because some just don't need to be brought up. You know what I'm saying? But technology has certainly been a companion for many people, and now we have people again.
Right.
So all this, if you know who's important, if you're all just looking at your phones all the time.
Having communicated with one another and having communed with one another through a device has a certain way of interacting, a certain protocol. But then going back with a three-dimensional person, that's going to be a whole other way of interacting. We didn't necessarily have to worry about, well, we didn't have to worry about the contagion or the virus through a screen.
Right. As
we reintegrate and ease back into socializing with someone in a 3D situation, are you hugging? Are you shaking hands? Mm-hmm. How comfortable are you with a certain distance from one another? Are we going to interact one way when we're indoors? Do we interact differently when we're outdoors? All these different things that even when they're not spoken, even when they're not said, we're communicating through our body and facial expressions to the other. And so there's this awkward discomfort that people are going to be getting into, and in part because of coming into place, but because of the technology too, that we've been interacting a certain way through our devices.
How many shows have you binge watched? You know what I'm saying? Your attention is off of real, and now we're going back to real.
Right. All of these streaming services have made a killing during this time.
I've been so thankful for them. But, you know, and maybe it's time to back off from some of that.
Yeah, maybe we can binge on one another.
Yeah.
While maintaining prudent social distance.
Let's be nice. All right, yeah. But, you know, I think, you know, a lot of us have developed some habits that probably you don't need to watch, you know, the entire season of whatever. Yeah. Although there's Tuesday.
Some good shows out there.
I know. And I think I've watched all of them, and a couple of bad ones. Yeah. Okay. What about? Let's talk a little bit about as we go back into society. If you have to show a card to prove your vaccination before you can get in.
Right. Yeah, that's something that different municipalities in different states,
it's being talked
different
about.
Countries are talking about. Yeah. Of airlines, for example, you know, do you show a vaccination card? That's something that's going to be an interesting thing to see how it plays out and where people fall on that. And if you happen to have not been vaccinated yet or happen to choose to opt out of it, what does that mean on the larger scale, right? And those conversations that people are going, oh no, I can't get on a plane, or no, I can't travel, or no, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't go to a sporting event, I can't go to a concert.
I have a feeling we're going to be talking about this for as it develops, as we see some of these things happening.
You asked a question earlier in terms of what are the long-term effects. These are perhaps some of the societal long-term effects that we're going to see after COVID, depending on how things play themselves out in the weeks to come.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the University of Holy Cross is starting up again? And
yes. We are starting back up again for in-person learning in the fall of 2021. And so for those individuals who are interested in attaining a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, or a doctoral degree in a number of different disciplines, you can look us up on our website at the University of Holy Cross's website and see what program of study might be of interest to you. There's a number of different programs. There's over 65 programs that you can choose to study at the University of Holy Cross.
Sweet. And can you still do a little online?
Yes, and we also offer online courses this summer and beyond. There's the online synchronous and asynchronous version of many of the classes that are available.
Okay. All right, we're running out of time, but any tips?
Yes, in terms of the tips, we need to continue to follow the CDC guidelines. Maintain that distance, wear that mask, wash your hands, and relax. Take it slow, and remember that you're responsible for your own health and well-being. So as restrictions ease, you decide at what pace you will ease back into society.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Roy Salgado, and another Dr. Salgado, Dr. Amanda Salgado from the University of Holy Cross, and all your colleagues, really. And thank you for watching. We want to help as we are all coping during the COVID crisis.